Hey everyone, Flo from OFTWOLANDS here, and this is a new Blackmagic Pyxis 12K. So in this video I want to share with you my first impressions of the camera, who I think it is for, and why I'm personally excited by the new Pyxis. I also recently shot a short documentary piece with my friend Thomas Teissier, and we used the Pyxis 12K for most of the project, so I'll definitely talk about that as well. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about the new Pyxis 12K, so feel free to use this video as some sort of a forum and leave your questions in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer in the comments or in the next videos. And of course, feel free to subscribe, as I will share a lot more content about and with the Pyxis 12K, including footage, comparison videos, and reviews. Now let's get into it. By the way, before I start, this is a beta version I believe, so it might be slightly different than the production one. And of course, this is not a full in-depth review of the camera. I like to take my time and do more projects with it, but I really wanted to share my first impressions because I know that this is a camera that people have been waiting for, and I am personally very impressed, and I want to give you my first impressions and what I think about the camera after using it on that short documentary project, but also on my own. From the outside, it looks pretty much identical to the 6K in terms of the shape, the form factor, the size, and the weight. This new one though has a 12K full frame sensor, the same one that you can find on the URSA 12K LF. I've been shooting for a few months with the URSA LF and I absolutely love the sensor. So this sensor means also no crop in 12K, 8K, and 4K. But to me, the most exciting part is that you also get the 16 stops of dynamic range. This is definitely one of the most important aspects of the 12K sensor, and it's definitely a step above from the 13 stops that you get on a regular 6K. Aside from the sensor, it's pretty much the same camera. You've got the BPU style batteries, you've got SDI connections, you've got the same buttons, you've got the same layout, and it also has 2 slots for CF Express cards. And you also have the same screen on the side. This one comes in 3 mounts as well: L, locking EF, and PL. I've got mine in PL. And of course you can use the same accessories as the URSA Cine, so the top handle, the monitor, the EVF, and this one, however, you can use both the EVF and the monitor at the same time. But of course, because the Pyxis is a much smaller body than the URSA 12K, and you are missing out on a few features, and the main one is of course the internal NDs, and you are also limited in terms of frame rates. I think for me, if this one had internal NDs, it would make a pretty much near perfect camera. Even though the frame rates are limited, it's still very impressive for such a small body. You can shoot open gate in 12K at 40 FPS, and you can also shoot in 8 and 4K at 72 FPS. But you can also shoot in 12K 2.4:1 at 60 FPS, and you can also do 8K at 112 FPS, which is extremely impressive. And of course, there's also no media module that you can find on the URSA 12K or the 17K, which are the SSD module that you can fit directly into the cameras. This one has the same slots as the 6K, which are 2 CF Express. On my URSA, for example, I have the CF version, but if I wanted to upgrade, I could actually get the SSD module. So all in all, I think this is extremely impressive in terms of the features that you get, but also the size and of course the price. And essentially, in terms of the lineup, it sits between the Pyxis 6K and the URSA 12K. And depending on which way you're looking at it, I think to me it grabs the best of both cameras in a way. I think since the release of the original Pyxis 6K, there have been some different wants and needs in terms of having internal NDs, full XLRs, higher frame rates. I think this ticks a lot of boxes and is also the logical step for Blackmagic, having already the body and the sensor. Now the question is which one to get. I think there's never been a harder time for filmmakers to choose a Blackmagic camera, and as always it comes down to what you do and the way you like to work. I think personally, if you don't own either the Pyxis 6K or the URSA 12K, then this one makes a lot of sense because, as I said, you have the best of both worlds in a way. But then if you already have the Pyxis 6K, It really depends on if you need the extra resolution or if you need the higher frame rates and the dynamic range. And on the other hand, if you already have the URSA 12K LF, then do you need a smaller body that runs on smaller batteries that still retains the dynamic range and some of the frame rates and the sensor, but don't necessarily need the bigger footprints, the more expensive batteries, the weights and things like that. I've loved using the 17K 65 and I still love using the 12K LF. I think they're great cameras and they're fully spec'd up. They are workhorses of cameras. But obviously not everyone can handle the size and the weights, and in terms of production as well, I think that the URSAs are very much suited to mid to large production or smaller productions that uses cameras a lot, maybe on tripods and things like that. But if you are a solo operator or freelance or anything like that, I think the Pyxis is more often than not better suited because of its size, and you still get a very impressive image quality. So why am I excited about this new camera? I've been shooting with Blackmagic cameras, as you know, for more than 13 years, and I've done everything from travel, documentary, commercial, spec ad, licensing content, personal content, and I've been fortunate enough to use pretty much all of the cameras. And I have to say that the Pyxis 12K feels like the culmination of all of that, if that makes sense. I know it's not the URSA 12K LF, it's not the 17K 65, but for me personally, it really gets the best of everything that they've released so far. I think the Pyxis 12K now is at the point where the camera can pretty much handle anything in terms of resolution, in terms of frame rate, in terms of dynamic range, in terms of features. The build quality is great as well, it's very nice to shoot with. I think the only thing that's missing is maybe internal NDs to make it a complete package. But at the same time, I've been using the cameras without NDs for a few years now, and I've got VNDs, I've got rear NDs that I've used on shoots, I've got matte boxes, so it's not really an issue. But yeah, if we're talking about like camera as a whole package, I think this one ticks a lot of boxes, especially when you add the handle, which I love, is very comfortable, and the monitor. I think the monitor is definitely an essential accessory, and it makes for a very complete, powerful and compact kit. I think the URSA 17K and 12K LF have kind of brought a lot of opportunities and possibilities to solo shooters, mid productions, and also the industry as a whole, I believe. And it's great to see some of the features and aspects filtered down to a much more smaller, more affordable body like the Pyxis. I think at this point, the Pyxis 12K is pretty much for everyone. It ticks all the boxes, or at least a lot of boxes. You've got the resolution, you've got the frame rates, you've got the dynamic range, you've got the usability, you've got the menus, you've got the connections, you've got the battery types, you've got the mount options. You've got pretty much everything that can make a camera a great camera and a very useful camera, a very easy camera to use. Not to mention the amazing color science and the strength of the codecs as well. And as of course with Blackmagic, all of that at a very competitive price. I think, like I said before, if you are a big production company or if you've got the manpower, the crew, the URSA 12K LF or the 17K make a lot of sense because of the extra features, the different battery types, the different storage solution, the extra slow motion. So if you are doing a lot of slow motion, if you are doing a lot of like studio work or full drama production and long feature documentaries, then maybe the URSA 12K makes a lot more sense. But for everyone else that uses cameras the way that I do most of the time, or as a solo shooter, or even as bigger production when you need like 2, 3, or 4 cameras, this is a pretty incredible option. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I've recently shot a short documentary / portrait piece with my friend Thomas Teissier, and we've used the Pyxis 12K for pretty much the entire project. We were lucky enough to have the Pyxis 12K in time for that 3-day project, and we've also had the URSA 12K on set as a B cam. Usually I would use the URSA as the A cam and the Pyxis as a B cam, but for this project, which is again a portrait short documentary piece about a florist, it made more sense to use a smaller body like the Pyxis 12K. In terms of lenses, we used the Nisi Oris full frame primes, which were amazing on that sensor. They covered the entire sensor as well in 12K open gate, even with the 18mm, and we just loved the look, and it was a great combo whether it was on the Pyxis 12K or the URSA 12K. Having the two 12K sensors on set was great, not only for the image quality, but also because there were two of us, so we could cover the same scene with two cameras, knowing that we had the exact same sensor, so it was very easy to swap and also match. Shooting this project with the Pyxis 12K, specifically with that camera, was great because we were able to, like I said before, grab some of the very impressive features of the URSA 12K LF, like the dynamic range and part of the frame rates, but we were also able to shoot in a way that we wanted to shoot, which is handheld with a nimble sort of approach, very kind of like floaty camera reacting to what was happening, because it was a mix between a portrait piece and a documentary. So some of the scenes were planned, but a lot of the times we were also reacting and working on instinct, and I feel like it was very, very easy with the Pyxis to do that. A few months ago, we would have had to pick between the URSA and the Pyxis depending on the scene, which we have done recently. I've shot a project with Thomas again, where we had the URSA 12K and the Pyxis, and some of the scenes worked better with the URSA 12K because we needed the dynamic range, because we needed the frame rate. But a lot of the times when we were shooting in the car, for example, when we had to be very quick or like run around after the subject, the Pyxis is a better option. So now I feel like this one really bridges the gap between the two cameras, and it's great to see. In terms of resolutions and codecs and frame rates, so we shot mostly in 12K or 8K open gate 3x2 because it really suited the project, and that was the idea that we had before shooting it. And we also tried to shoot a lot of 8K 72 because for what we were doing, it was a great compromise between compromise. It's crazy that we actually talk about compromises when we are shooting in 8K 72. But yeah, so we shot a lot in 8K 72. That was a really great middle ground between like super high frame rates and resolution, because we knew that if we wanted to export the footage or the final piece in 4K, we had like double the resolution. It's a great number. We also shot a lot in 12K 40 FPS, and we also shot a lot in 8K 112 FPS, which is 2.4 to 1. This was more of a test, more by curiosity, because it doesn't match the project's aspect ratio, but it was great to use, and I think it made for some very, very interesting scenes and shots. And this is what I meant by this camera being near perfect, because the amount of choice that you get in resolution, aspect ratio and frame rate, it's pretty incredible. And it's also very, very quick and easy to change on the fly. Now, because people are going to ask me, yes, there are differences between the 6K and the 12K aside from the resolution and the frame rates. So for example, the battery drains a lot quicker. Obviously, you go from a 6K to 12K sensor, the frame rates are much higher. So when I was using my Core 98 BPU, we got about just over an hour. Normally with the Pyxis 6K, I get about double that. But when I think about it, it kind of makes sense, because when I use a 98 B mount on the URSA 12K LF, I get just over an hour. So it's pretty much the same thing between the two cameras. And of course, this makes sense because the Pyxis 12K needs a lot more power to run that sensor and the frame rates while it's still in the same body. The Pyxis 12K also makes slightly more noise than the 6K, especially when you start it, and it also runs slightly hotter. Again, keep in mind that we were using a beta version, and we were also experiencing a pretty crazy heat wave here in Europe during the entire shoot. Overall, it was a great experience using the Pyxis 12K, and it really felt like using a more powerful and capable version of the Pyxis 6K, which is already a very powerful and capable camera. And of course, as always, I will do a full review once I've used it enough, and I will also make a review of the Nisi set, so feel free to subscribe and stay tuned. And of course, don't forget to check out Thomas's channel, I'll link it below, as we will be releasing the full piece over there. To me, the Pyxis 12K is the camera to beat in 2025, but of course, as always, it depends on what you do and the way you like to work. Personally, I'm very excited to keep using this camera, and I'll make sure to share a lot more content. I'm a huge fan of this sensor, as I think it's a very versatile and useful one, and having it on a camera of that size, that is that modular, with that shape and the weight and everything, is pretty incredible. That's it for me for today, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. As I said before, let me know if you've got any more questions and what you think as well about this camera, and if you ordered one. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Also, feel free to check out my 2 ebooks, Freelance Documentary Filmmaking and Travel Cinematography, where you can find a streamlined but comprehensive overview from pre-production all the way to marketing, built on years of my own experience shooting short documentaries and travel videos around the world. And if you are interested, I'm also doing filmmaking mentoring sessions when you can ask me anything about a wide variety of topics.